Hello everyone and welcome to the OpenText Shinydocs webinar. During today's webinar, you'll learn about the best way to get 100% of documents managed in Documentum with zero disruption to the users and your organization. OpenText's best-selling third-party partner, Shinydocs, can increase ECM adoption by over 600% practically overnight by exposing Documentum as a desktop drive. And without further ado, I'll turn this over to Paul Kleinknecht, Vice President of Sales at Shinydocs, who is here to show you why Shinydocs is the only way to get all enterprise documents in Documentum.
Thanks very much, Matt. As Matt was suggested, we've been Partner of the Year. We've been involved with OpenText for a number of years now. Primarily, the success that we've had historically has been geared around content server, obviously. And now with the opportunity for us to extend this technology to the Documentum platform, we're in a really interesting position where we can actually address a new set of customers. So we're very happy to be speaking with you today. So today I'm going to walk through the solution that has been so successful around the world. I'm going to primarily focus on Documentum, and we're going to give you a bit of a sense of who we are and certainly end off with a bit of a demonstration of the solution. So as suggested, for the last 2 years in a row, we've been OpenText Global Technology Partner of the Year, and that's on the back of worldwide sales. That is the criteria. We have become their best-selling third-party technology and have been transacting with customers around the world. And the problem that we're really trying to solve is the same one that you're trying to solve as a customer of an ECM vendor, is you're trying to figure out a strategy to manage this dark data. And one of the primary strategies for doing that, of course, is to buying and deploying Documentum. So the idea is that clearly this blue ECM down here, this Documentum solution, it provides a ton of value. It's all of your audit history, your DocMan, your records management. It's your disposition, your tagging, your searchability. It is what managed data ought to be and is. And the challenge, though, is that this data set that you're seeing in front of you here, this represents just about, I'd say, most of the customers that we're running into, where you have the lion's share of your data that currently sits in file shares and desktops. And there's good reasons for that. I mean, if you think about complexity on file types, sometimes just causes a challenge with an ECM. As an example, if you've got an engineering stack like Civil 3D, Revit, linked Excel, or any kind of linked documents, they work just fine in a drive, and of course they struggle in an ECM. So when you think about trying to get a deployment, whether it's 1,000 or 10,000 users, or in some situations much more than that, the idea of training somebody to use something that they have to think about using and go and save the file to that repository versus in these file shares where the users don't have to think, they don't have to do anything different, they just save or save as. And so what we're trying to do, and what Shinydocs has done for Content Server, now Documentum, is that we've actually integrated the underlying ECM directly into the Windows operating system so that users who are used to using a shared drive now can continue to work in the same way that they always did. But what's actually happening is the data is moving from a shared drive into the underlying ECM. And now you have an opportunity to realize all of that value of your Documentum solution. So what it looks like is very simple. This is going to be almost boring, as we like to say. The idea is that a user who's used to working in their H drive, they can continue to work in that same H drive. But the reality is that the back-end storage for that H drive is now Documentum. The highlighted areas on the left-hand side represent all of the areas that you can now map directly to Documentum. So all of the desktop drives, and obviously OneDrive being very prevalent, Box, Dropbox perhaps are in your environments, and certainly all your letter drives, your H drive, P drive, whatever. Those now, when you think about where a user can save a file, if you look at these highlighted areas, every single area on the desktop that a user is used to saving can now be managed in Documentum without the users actually knowing it. And that's a really powerful proposition. You know, a lot of customers we talk to, they say, well, we've got the important documents in Documentum, and yet they've only got 1 to 5% of their data in Documentum. So I think it's safe to say that everything that a user's working on has to be considered important. And another way to look at this is when, or if an organization is hit with one of these crypto lockers, WannaCry or something like that, it automatically locks up your file shares, and you'll soon realize quickly just how much data is important that is now inaccessible because it was in that file share. So a really good strategy for that is to actually move your entire file shares. If you think about the disk space on a file share costs the same as disk space on Documentum. So the idea of moving your file share into Documentum and having users notice zero change makes a lot of sense. Not only once it's in there, you can add the metadata, you can do all kinds of things. You can do the dedupe, the UCANs that you can get at in terms of driving incremental value are endless. And you're now protected and secure in terms of an audit. Another area that we hear a lot about is just employees leaving an organization and copying a terabyte of data from a file share. That's not even a data breach because nobody knows it happened. Had that all been in Documentum, you would obviously have an audit trail. Shinydrive is just allowing Windows Explorer to become the primary interface for that ECM platform. And so here's a number of capabilities that the client has. The architecture is very simple on this solution. There's a little 4 meg drivers that are pushed out through a local client, and they talk to some middleware, a Tomcat server that talks to Documentum. The users have the ability to right-click and take files or folders offline, so we're just merely syncing that data down to the desktop. That user can get on a plane, they can work on their data. Upon reconnectivity, the solution will manage the conflicts, so the user will be prompted with something to the effect of, would you like to overwrite somebody else's changes, or would you like to create a new version of that file? So that user is well aware of what they're doing. They're making a conscious decision now. So this offline capability really simplifies the opportunity. In terms of Outlook integration, Outlook is where most users spend 90% of their time, if not more. The big differentiator between our solution and other integrations with Outlook is that because we're porting Windows Explorer into Outlook, all of those integrations become intact. And we're not just exposing Documentum in Outlook, we're exposing all of your drives because users typically have a number of different drives. So now users have the ability to drag and drop bidirectionally, either from Documentum into an email or from the email into Documentum. And they can do that at will without having to think about it. And some of the advantages of our approach is that we have some intelligent caching. So where our users may have thousands of objects in a folder, could take a long time to cache. Our solution just understands that and it'll cache that folder structure. So next time the user goes to hit it, it'll seem very fast and snappy. Another use case that we've been solving for customers is this idea of high performance library. So we're answering the question, how do we ensure users at a location have access to pertinent data that allows them to maintain a certain level of performance regardless of WAN connectivity or regardless of whether or not Documentum is up? And so the initial customer where this became relevant for was an oil and gas customer where they had 32 floating oil rigs. And this customer had to ensure that they had access to critical control documents regardless of satellite connectivity, which you can imagine was spotty at best. So what we do here is we're able to scrape a library of data from Documentum, either push it out over the wire to the location or physically ship it. And then all the library is constantly crawled and managed at the head office level. Any updates to that library will be pushed out and reflected on that remote library. The user is able to search directly from Windows Explorer in an offline state. They're able to search with their category, opening up files in their native application. So regardless of whether it's a AutoCAD, Civil 3D, Revit file, they'll be able to open that document and be able to consume that content. Obviously, it's offline, so it is read-only, but it certainly solves the problem of ensuring that users have access to their data without the requirement of having to put a full-blown ECM at that facility. So here's a customer of ours out of UK. This is a 3,500 user council, and this customer is federally mandated to have records in compliance and managing their data, child welfare documentation, taxi licensing, etc. They had been doing regular quarterly training sessions. This was an ongoing process. And in the customer's opinion, they failed to get users to use, in this case, it was Content Server, but their ECMs are all similar in terms of users adopting them. So what happened when they launched Shinydrive is they stopped doing all their training. They no longer were doing quarterly training sessions, and they realized a 600% increase in document views. That was not only pivotal for the customer, but what it made them realize is that users are now willing to use the system. And so this customer then looked at competing ECMs that they had deployed internally, and they decommissioned 2 of them. So we migrated another 3.2 million files from other ECMs into Content Server. This deployment is now one of the bigger deployments at that user size that we've seen. And this is just a success story for us. Initially, when customers are trying to prove out the concept of how effective Shinydrive interface to Documentum might be, or a content server, the question that is ultimately being asked is, and it's very basic and it makes sense, is can users actually find the data? Can a user find what they need in order to solve the problem in the field? And that came from these floating oil rigs where the users just had to be able to find and access control documents. And this is the response that we got back. So we're quite proud of that. That's the slideware overview. What we're going to do now is we're going to pass it over to Robert. Robert is one of our senior devs, and he's going to just walk you through a quick demonstration of the solution, and you're going to get a sense of what it looks like.
Thank you, Paul. You can see here I have 2 drives, V and W, that are mapped into my Documentum system. V is the government cabinet, and W is my administrator cabinet, the home cabinet for my user. We have the ability to map any user's home cabinet to a drive, as well as any cabinet in your system and any folder within a cabinet. You can see that navigation is as simple as clicking anywhere in the hierarchy, just like you would on a normal drive. Files are all accessible, easily opened by double-clicking and reading the file. If you want to edit a file, you simply pick the one you want to edit, double-click on it, and the application associated with that file will open. So you can see I will make a change, save the document, and it is saving directly back into Documentum. It's finished, I can close it, and it asks me to unreserve. So the reserve is the Documentum checkout, which allows exclusive access to the document. And when you're done with your changes, you can unreserve, or you can choose not to unreserve if you would like to keep it reserved. So I will say yes, unreserve it, and it is now back to normal status. You can see a small icon shows up as a little check mark, shows you that it's reserved. Also, I have the Internet Explorer browser open to my web top, and it wants me to refresh because it has detected a change as well. And it will reflect the checkout status in its display. So we can copy files around as easily as clicking, dragging, and the operation simply happens. We also have the same interface inside Outlook, where you can navigate your shared drives and access your files that way. You can drag and drop emails from Explorer directly into Documentum, and you can drag and drop attachments from emails directly into Documentum. This interface is integrated with the shell, so all of the right-click menu options are available inside this panel. I can double-click on the file, and it will open in Adobe. The same works for creating new emails. You can also drag and drop files from this interface into an email. And you can see this file is checked out by me, and that's reflected down here in the status. Other interesting option that we have is if you need to import data from your machine in large chunks, you can simply select the folders you want and select the Import to Records Management option, pick a drive, and it gives you a chooser that allows you to choose other drives on the system if you want to, but it opens the one that you picked initially. And you can pick a directory, select it, and it will automatically import all those files that you had chosen in the background while you work, and gives you a nice display to tell you when it's done. Like I said, it works with every application that you have. AutoCAD, all the Office applications are simply double-click and edit. It's very easy to use. Your users will not even notice that they're using Documentum. Everything opens very nicely as if you were using a drive.
Thanks very much, Robert. I appreciate the overview. I think From that presentation, hopefully you can see that users are able to work the same way that they always did. They're able to create a shortcut on a desktop, that shortcut now being back-ended in Documentum. It's not that there's any training, and we always comment that we drive 100% adoption, but it's not because users love what we've done. It's that users don't even know what we've done. They're just working in Windows Explorer, and that's really the real value of Shinydrive. It gets all your users into the system without having them actually have to understand or learn the system. We were showing today, one of the things that Robert showed was this ability to right-click on a file share folder structure and bulk migrate that into Documentum. That's really a powerful new capability that customers have been asking for a long time. A lot of organizations would like the idea of users to be able to move their data into the system, and we've just made it very, very simple to do so. A lot of organizations or even business units within organizations have interest in trying this solution. And one of the unique capabilities is not only the power of our solution, but it's the simplicity. What we can do for organizations is we're happy to set up a POC with them. It takes us an hour to install and deploy the solution. And you can literally put a handful of users or 10 users into the system directly after that. So really an easy way to taste it, try it, and get it into your environment that we would be happy to support alongside OpenText. I certainly thank everybody for joining today.